2026 will be the happiest year of your life if you do these things, but not in the way you think. Carl Jung discovered something that most people spend their entire lives missing. The path to happiness isn't what we've been taught. It's not about getting more money, finding the perfect relationship, or finally, achieving that big goal. Jung found that chasing happiness in these ways actually creates the opposite. It leads to a deep, quiet misery that most people mistake for normal life. What Jung uncovered was radical. He realized that when we try to be happy all the time, we're actually wearing a mask. He called this mask the persona. It's the version of ourselves we show to the world. The smiling face we put on even when we're falling apart inside. The "I'm fine" we say when nothing feels fine at all. And here's what makes this so dangerous. The more we perform happiness, the more we bury our real selves. We push down the anger, the sadness, the parts of us that don't fit the happy image. Jung discovered that this creates a split inside us, a war between who we pretend to be and who we actually are. Through decades of clinical work, Jung observed this pattern again and again. People would come to him seemingly successful, achieving everything society told them would bring happiness. Yet inside, they were hollow. They had sacrificed authenticity for approval. They had buried their true nature to maintain an acceptable image. And the psychological cost was devastating. Jung realized that this split between the persona and the authentic self was one of the primary sources of human suffering in modern life. Most people ignore the specific psychological shifts that could actually make 2026 different. They're uncomfortable shifts. They require you to look at parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. But Jung found that these are the only things that create lasting happiness. Not the temporary high of a new purchase or achievement, but the deep satisfaction of finally being whole. That's what we're going to explore. The things you must do in 2026 if you want it to be truly happy. And I'll warn you now, these aren't the feel-good platitudes you'll find everywhere else. Let's start with why everything you've tried hasn't worked. Why all the positive thinking, the vision boards, the goal setting leaves you feeling emptier than before. Jung discovered something that the self-help industry doesn't want you to know. Happiness isn't something you chase. It's something that emerges when you stop running from yourself. Think about the last time you felt genuinely happy, not just distracted or entertained, but truly at peace. Chances are, it wasn't because you got something you wanted. It was because, for a moment, you stopped pretending. Jung studied thousands of people throughout his career. He noticed a pattern. The ones who seemed happiest on the outside, the ones with the perfect lives and constant smiles, were often the most miserable inside. They had built beautiful personas, impressive masks that everyone admired, but underneath, they were hollow. They had sacrificed their real selves for approval. They had buried everything authentic in pursuit of looking good. And the weight of this performance was crushing them, slowly, invisibly. This is where the first thing you must do comes in. Jung called it confronting the shadow. Your shadow is everything about yourself that you've rejected, the anger you're not allowed to feel, the selfishness you've been taught is wrong, the darkness you pretend doesn't exist. Most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow. They build their whole identity around being nice, or good, or positive. But here's what Jung discovered. Whatever you reject in yourself doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It operates in the dark, influencing your choices, sabotaging your relationships, creating the exact problems you're trying to avoid. Imagine someone who prides themselves on being endlessly kind. They never get angry. They always put others first. They smile through every boundary violation. On the surface, they look like a saint, but underneath, there's a rage they won't acknowledge. It shows up in passive-aggressive comments, in sudden explosions over small things, in a deep resentment toward the very people they claim to love. This person hasn't transcended anger. They've just buried it, and that buried anger is running their life from the shadows. Jung's clinical observations revealed this pattern countless times. The most outwardly peaceful people often carried the most violent inner worlds. The individuals who prided themselves on never losing their temper were frequently the ones whose suppressed rage manifested in physical symptoms, relationship sabotage, or sudden breakdowns. This wasn't coincidence. It was the inevitable result of refusing to integrate the shadow. Jung understood that psychological health required wholeness, not perfection. It required acknowledging all parts of yourself, not just the socially acceptable ones. So here's what you must do in 2026. Sign what I call a shadow contract. This means you stop running from the parts of yourself you don't like. You turn around and face them. You acknowledge the anger, the jealousy, the pettiness, the selfishness, not to indulge these things, but to understand them. Because Jung discovered something remarkable. When you accept your shadow, you gain access to its energy. All that power you were using to suppress your darkness becomes available for actual living. Let me give you a practical example. Say you've always prided yourself on being selfless. You give and give, never asking for anything in return. But deep down, there's a part of you that's furious about this, that feels used, that secretly resents everyone you help. Instead of pretending this resentment doesn't exist, you acknowledge it. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. You sit with it. You let yourself feel the full force of your anger without acting on it. And something shifts. You realize you don't have to be either completely selfless or completely selfish. You can give when you genuinely want to, and set boundaries when you need to. The energy you are using to maintain the selfless persona becomes available for authentic generosity. Consider a case profile that illustrates this dynamic perfectly. A composite example based on patterns Jung observed repeatedly in his practice. We see this clearly in the story of someone known as the most giving person in her community. Always volunteering, always helping, always available. Everyone loved her. But she sought therapeutic help because she was having violent dreams. Dreams where she was hurting the very people she spent her days helping. A Jungian analyst would recognize immediately what was happening. Her conscious mind had banished all selfishness, but her unconscious was screaming in protest. The shadow always finds a way to express itself. If you won't acknowledge it consciously, it will erupt unconsciously. Through therapeutic work following Jung's framework, this pattern reveals itself clearly. The individual learns to honor her own needs without guilt. She discovers that she can be both generous and boundaried, that taking care of herself doesn't make her selfish, it makes her sustainable. The violent dreams stop, not because she became less giving, but because she was no longer at war with herself. She had signed the shadow contract. She had made peace with the parts of herself she'd been taught to reject. This is the power of shadow integration that Jung identified throughout his research. This leads directly into the second thing you must do. Jung discovered that most people are destroying their joy by trying to be good. This sounds backwards. Isn't being good the whole point? But Jung made a distinction that changes everything. He said we must be whole, not good. Being good means conforming to external standards of behavior. It means suppressing parts of yourself to fit moral codes created by others. Being whole means integrating all aspects of yourself, light and dark, into a functioning unity. Think about how exhausting it is to maintain a good image. You have to constantly monitor yourself, police your thoughts, Hide your real reactions. Pretend you're more patient, more forgiving, more enlightened than you actually are. Jung found that this constant performance drains your life force. It takes enormous energy to keep up a false front. Energy that could be used for creativity, connection, or actual growth. Instead, you're burning it all to maintain an illusion. The psychological research Jung conducted revealed something fascinating about this phenomenon. He found that people who tried hardest to be good often ended up behaving in ways that contradicted their conscious values. Their suppressed qualities would emerge sideways, in unconscious behaviors they couldn't recognize in themselves. The person who prided themselves on never judging others would engage in subtle forms of criticism they didn't even notice. The individual who saw themselves as perfectly honest would practice sophisticated forms of self-deception. This wasn't hypocrisy in the traditional sense. It was the inevitable result of trying to eliminate parts of human nature rather than integrate them. Here's what happens when you drop the good persona. At first, it's terrifying. You worry that people will reject you if they see who you really are. But Jung discovered something beautiful. When you stop performing goodness and start living authentically, you become whole. And wholeness is magnetic in a way that performance never is. People can sense the difference between someone who's genuinely integrated and someone who's desperately maintaining an image. The integrated person radiates a kind of peace that all the forced positivity in the world can't fake. Jung described this as the death of the ideal self. We all carry an image of who we think we should be. The perfect parent, the selfless friend, the endlessly patient partner. We torture ourselves trying to live up to these impossible standards, and every time we fall short, which is constantly, we feel like failures. But Jung realized that the ideal self is a tyrant. It demands perfection while offering nothing but criticism. Dropping this tyrant feels like psychological death at first. Without the ideal self driving you forward, who are you? The answer is both simple and profound. You're human. Gloriously, messily, imperfectly human. So in 2026, give yourself permission to stop being good. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or selfish. It means being honest. It means saying no when you mean no. It means admitting when you're tired, angry, or overwhelmed. It means dropping the exhausting act of pretending you're more evolved than you are. Jung found that this honesty releases massive amounts of energy. The energy you were using to maintain your mask becomes available for actual living. And that's when real happiness becomes possible. The third thing involves something most people completely ignore. Jung called it attending to the unconscious. Your unconscious mind is speaking to you constantly through dreams, intuitions, and gut feelings. But most people have learned to dismiss these signals. They trust their rational minds completely and ignore everything else. Jung discovered this is a catastrophic mistake. Your unconscious knows things your conscious mind can't access. It sees patterns you're too close to notice. It understands what you need before you're ready to admit it. Pay attention to your dreams in 2026. Not in some mystical way, but practically. Your dreams are your unconscious mind's way of processing information your conscious mind can't handle. When you have a recurring dream, it's your psyche trying to tell you something important. When you wake up with a strong feeling about a situation, that's not random. It's information bubbling up from deeper levels of awareness. Jung found that people who learn to listen to these signals make better decisions. They avoid disasters their rational minds would have walked them straight into. Jung's research into dream analysis revealed that the unconscious communicates through a symbolic language that remains consistent across cultures and time periods. He called these universal symbols archetypes. When you dream of water, you're often dealing with emotions. When you dream of a house, you're exploring different aspects of your psyche. When you dream of being chased, you're running from something in your waking life that needs to be confronted. Understanding this symbolic language allows you to decode the messages your unconscious is constantly sending. Here's a simple practice Jung recommended. Before you go to sleep, ask your unconscious a question, something you're genuinely struggling with. Then pay attention to your dreams that night. Don't expect literal answers. The unconscious speaks in symbols and feelings, but you'll often wake up with a clarity you didn't have before, or you'll notice a subtle shift in how you feel about the situation. Jung discovered that the unconscious is constantly working on your behalf if you're willing to listen. But here's what most people don't understand about the unconscious. It's not trying to confuse you with cryptic symbols. It's trying to show you truths your conscious mind isn't ready to face directly. When you dream about being chased, your unconscious might be showing you that you're running from something in your waking life. When you dream about losing your teeth, it might be expressing anxiety about losing power or control. The unconscious uses images because images bypass the rational mind's defenses. They slip past the ego's gatekeepers and deliver information directly to your emotional center. This brings us to the fourth thing, and it's perhaps the most important. Jung made a distinction between ego goals and soul tasks. Ego goals are things you want because they make you look good, feel successful, or gain approval. Soul tasks are things that emerge from your deepest nature. They don't need external validation because they're aligned with who you actually are. Most people spend their entire lives pursuing ego goals and wondering why success feels hollow. Think about your current goals. Are you chasing them because you genuinely love the process, or because you love what achieving them will say about you? Are you working towards something because it lights you up inside, or because it will impress others? Jung found that ego-driven motivation always leads to disappointment. Even when you achieve the goal, it doesn't satisfy. Because what you really wanted wasn't the achievement itself, but the feeling of being worthy that you thought the achievement would give you. Jung's concept of individuation centers on this very distinction. He observed that the first half of life is typically dominated by ego development. We build careers, establish identities, achieve external markers of success. This is necessary and important. But Jung found that true psychological maturity requires a shift in the second half of life. We must move from ego-driven achievement to soul-driven expression. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition or success. It means ensuring that your ambitions emerge from authentic self-knowledge rather than unconscious needs for validation. In 2026, shift your motivation from ego to soul. This means doing things for the love of the action itself, not for the reward at the end. It means choosing activities that make you lose track of time, not because they'll lead somewhere impressive, but because they're expressions of your authentic nature. Jung called this following your bliss, but he didn't mean chasing pleasure. He meant aligning your actions with your deepest values and interests, regardless of whether they lead to conventional success. Here's the test Jung offered. If all external rewards were removed, if no one would ever know what you accomplished, would you still want to do it? If the answer is yes, that's a soul task. If the answer is no, that's an ego goal. Most people fill their lives with ego goals and then wonder why they feel empty even when they're successful. The ego can never be satisfied because it's always comparing, always needing more, always seeking validation from outside. The soul, on the other hand, is fulfilled by authentic expression. It doesn't need applause because it's already complete. So look at your plans for 2026. How much of your time and energy is devoted to looking good versus being authentic? How many of your goals are about external validation versus internal alignment? Jung found that when people shift from ego-driven to soul-driven living, their whole experience of life transforms. They're no longer on a treadmill of constant achievement and disappointment. They're engaged in meaningful work that sustains them regardless of outcome. This is the distinction between busy work and meaningful work. Busy work is anything you do primarily because you think you should, because it will make you money, status, or approval. It keeps you occupied, but leaves you empty. Meaningful work is anything that emerges from your authentic interests and values. It might not be recognized or rewarded by others, but it fills you up from the inside. Jung discovered that a life devoted to meaningful work, even if that work is humble and unrecognized, is infinitely more satisfying than a life devoted to impressive but soul-deadening achievements. Now let me bring all of this together. The happiest year of your life isn't about everything going right. It's about becoming unbreakable, because you're finally your true self. When you've confronted your shadow, you're no longer afraid of your own darkness. When you've dropped the good persona, you're no longer exhausted by performance. When you're listening to your unconscious, you're guided by wisdom deeper than rational thought. When you're following soul tasks instead of ego goals, you're fulfilled by the process itself, not dependent on outcomes. This is what Jung meant by individuation. It's the process of becoming whole, of integrating all parts of yourself into a functioning unity. And he discovered that this wholeness creates a kind of happiness that circumstances can't touch. Because it doesn't depend on external conditions. It emerges from internal alignment. You're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer pretending to be someone you're not. You're no longer chasing achievements to prove your worth. You're simply being who you actually are, and that's enough. Jung spent decades developing and refining this understanding through both his clinical work and his own personal journey. His concept of individuation wasn't theoretical. It emerged from observing what actually worked for people seeking psychological wholeness. He noticed that those who achieved genuine happiness shared certain characteristics. They had done the difficult work of shadow integration. They had released attachment to external validation. They had developed a relationship with their unconscious, and they had aligned their outer lives with their inner truth. These weren't separate achievements, but interconnected aspects of a single process. 2026 will be your happiest year if you truly understand this. It's not a year of chasing, it's a year of becoming. You're not going to find happiness out there, in achievements and acquisitions. You're going to find it in here, in the depths of your own being, when you finally stop running from yourself. Jung spent his entire life studying human consciousness. He worked with thousands of patients, and he discovered, again and again, that the people who found genuine happiness were the ones who did this inner work, the ones who faced their shadows, dropped their masks, listened to their depths, and aligned their actions with their authentic nature. So here's your assignment for 2026. Start by making a list of everything you've rejected about yourself, all the qualities you've labeled as bad or wrong, your anger, your selfishness, your laziness, whatever you've been hiding. Then, instead of trying to eliminate these qualities, try to understand them. What are they protecting? What need are they trying to meet? Jung found that when we understand our shadow qualities, we can integrate them consciously. Next, identify one area where you're maintaining a false persona, where you're pretending to be more patient, more forgiving, more positive than you actually are. Then experiment with being honest. Not brutally honest, but authentically honest. See what happens when you stop performing and start being real. Start paying attention to your dreams and intuitions. Keep a notebook by your bed. When you wake up, write down whatever you remember. Over time, you'll start noticing patterns. Your unconscious will begin communicating more clearly because you're finally listening. Finally, examine your goals for 2026. For each one, ask yourself honestly, is this an ego goal or a soul task? Am I doing this because I love it or because I think I should? Because it will look good or because it feels right? Then have the courage to let go of the ego goals and commit to the soul tasks. This is how you make 2026 the happiest year of your life. Not by chasing more, achieving more, or becoming more, but by facing your shadows, dropping your masks, listening to your depths, and aligning with your authentic nature. Jung discovered that happiness isn't something we find. It's something that emerges when we finally stop running from ourselves, when we integrate our darkness, embrace our wholeness, trust our unconscious, and follow our soul's calling. The year ahead isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. It's about becoming so aligned with your true self that external circumstances lose their power to disturb your fundamental peace. This is the happiness Jung found in his own life and helped countless others discover. It's not dependent on success or failure, approval or rejection, gain or loss. It's the happiness of being whole, integrated, and authentically yourself. So as you move into 2026, remember this: you don't need to chase happiness. You need to stop running from yourself. Face your shadows, drop your masks, listen to your depths, follow your soul, and watch as genuine happiness, the kind that lasts, emerges from within. Not because everything went right, but because you finally became whole. That's the gift Jung offered the world. The understanding that true happiness comes not from getting what we want, but from becoming who we truly are. Make 2026 the year you finally give yourself that precious gift. If this perspective on happiness resonates with you, and you want to understand your mind at deeper levels, like and subscribe to this channel. We explore the profound insights of Carl Jung and how they apply to modern life. And remember, the journey to authentic happiness begins the moment you stop performing and start being real. Thank you for watching, and here's to your happiest year yet. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.